This is the Dungeon Master's Handbook. Hello everyone, this is Michael, also known as Chicago Wiz. Thanks for listening. This episode we're going to talk about a couple of different things. We're going to talk about Dungeon 23, and we're going to talk about XP and leveling and how I do it a little bit different than the rules is written. Hope you stay and listen. So Dungeon 23, I am well into my 5th week of working on the dungeon, which may seem odd since we're only in our 3rd week of 2023. But I had started early in order to be able to start people actually playing in my Dungeon 23 Mega Dungeon, which I'm calling the Black Maw. It's going really well. Having people in the dungeon has proven to be a good amount of motivation for me. I have 6 players, 5 of whom had shown up for the first session, and we'll see if I have a consistent group or what happens there. But it was a fun session. I kind of threw them into the middle of things. Used an old trope of you're prisoners on a prison ship and you're being kicked off the ship on this island out in the middle of nowhere, and your sentence is to survive for a certain amount of time before you're able to be freed. They had all their gear, and the only path off the rocky beach led to the Black Maw. I know, a little railroady. They actually could have explored the hills and continued on if they wanted to be able to find town, but they opted to go into the dungeon first, which is cool. I have a after-play report all written up on my blog if you're interested, as well as on my blog I keep track of my weekly build logs, where I talk about each day about something that I've run into, or maybe voice a little frustration, how the dice are driving me crazy, blah, blah, yada, yada. But it's fun stuff. I'm having fun. It's part of my daily Dungeon 23 ritual, where I go do a little bit of random generation, a little bit of writing, a little bit of blogging, and then move on with the day. I hope if you're participating that you're finding it as enjoyable as well. I know watching the Dungeon 23 hashtag on Mastodon and the Dungeon 23 subreddit, 16 days in, and there is still a lot of creativity going on, which is really wonderful to see, and I'm glad that people are having a good time with it. A lot of creativity out there, a lot of ideas being floated about, a lot of cool stuff, a lot of similarities too. It's interesting to see that, and maybe we can talk about that in a future episode. But I have something else to talk about. So that's my Dungeon 23 update. Let's talk about XP and leveling, especially in context of original Dungeons & Dragons OD&D and Advanced Dungeons & Dragons as written in the late 70s. Certainly the basics and 2nd edition followed along with what I'm going to talk about, but I'm primarily focused on these 2 editions because, well, they're what I play. I started off like everyone else reading the books and quickly understanding that, hey, XP is all about the loot and the killing of creatures. And on the surface of it, there's not a lot of disagreement on that. I mean, certainly the books promote this idea. And, I've ran with that pretty much all of my life. I've had minor variations to that. if the players had done something, that felt like that they should have gotten some wealth out of it. I might be generous with that. Back in the late aughts, early teens, there was an idea about exploration with XP capitalized in the word exploration. The idea was that if the players went to some new place for the first time, you would get XP for it to help encourage, exploring and finding new places, which for a campaign based on exploration, like you may have heard the phrase West Marches. I'll let you Google that if you've never heard of that before. There's been a ton written about West Marches style of campaigns, popularized in the OSR. Those kinds of exploration games would benefit from, an XP reward. XP being the idea of rewarding someone. The more XP you get, the higher level you are, the more skilled, more trained, yada yada. And by and large, I stuck with that idea till about 2015. And I attended GaryCon up in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin in 2015. And I had the chance to play in an Empire of Petal Thrones, also known as Tecumseh. And this is, for those of you that have only briefly heard about it, Empire of the Petal Thrones, Tecumseh is the first kind of game-setting hybrid that came out after D&D was released. So D&D was released in 1974, but Gary and David had been playing D&D for a couple of years, maybe a little longer before then. Some variation thereof. It started with David Arneson. Gary saw it, and, the rest is history. A gentleman that they had shown this to by the name of Professor M.A.R. Barker liked this game so much that he adapted it to a world that he had been playing with and created the Empire of the Petal Thrones game as well as the setting. He basically customized D&D to fit the world that he had built. Today that doesn't seem too strange, but in 1974, that was a pretty big deal. He also self-published his game and setting, limited number of copies to his friends and whatnot. And then in 1975, TSR reached out to him, and he produced what, as far as I can tell, is the first box set of a D&D-like variant that was published. Arduin came out a little bit later. Tunnels and Trolls, which is a competitor, or was a competitor to Dungeons and Dragons, came out in 75, but seems to have come out after Empire of the Petal Thrones. Anyway, the reason, and I'm going to make a quick side note here, because for those of you that are either aware or going to go off and search about Empire of the Petal Throne, you're going to run into some very unpleasant, horrifying facts about Professor M.A.R. Barker. He was a Nazi sympathizer and an anti-Semitist. That's really messed up and unfortunate. It's unfortunate because so many people really enjoyed Empire of the Petal Throne, Tecumseh, and then in, I think it was 2020, 2021, this news came out, confirmed that he had participated in quite recent Nazi sympathizing activities. I bring this up because, again, you're going to find out about it, and it's yet another case of where something that had the potential to be so wonderful now has this shadow over it of something pretty horrific. I personally don't play EPT anymore, and that's my choice. Everybody's got to make their own choices. What I choose to do, though, is take the good things that I learned from the setting and the game and make them part of my own, which, for me, that's all I can do. Everybody's got their own deal. Everybody's got their own path that they have to follow, and, you do you. All right, so let's talk about what I learned about leveling in XP. So, 2015, Jeff Berry, also known as Kyrene Bacall, who was a player in the original Empire of Battle Thrones campaign, was hosting his game. Me and another old school guy had a ton of fun ripping through his scenario, completing it in about a third of the time that he expected. But, we had fun. Jeff's announced that I was a first level character. I was now third level in, I think it was the Cult of the Red God, something like that. And I was astonished. And I'm like, we didn't find that much gold, and we didn't earn that much reward money, and we didn't kill that many guards, because we basically used every tool at our advantage to sneak in and sneak out without really, letting anyone know what we were doing. Jeff goes, exactly. And because of that, the cult is so impressed at your ability of humiliating the kidnapper's cult, rescuing this person who was a high-placed Cult of the Red God priest or priestess, something like that. Anyway, this cult is so impressed that you are now on the fast track for being one of the new up-and-comers, and you're now third level with all of the rights, privileges, and powers that come with that. And I was astonished at this, and I said, Jeff, is this normal in Empire? And he proceeds to tell me about how this was very common in the original campaign, where, and in fact had its basis in Dave Arneson's game, where if you perform some great service for the faction you were in, or you did something that, really helped out the region that you were in, you would find yourselves bumped up levels. And we didn't talk too much about it, but I chewed on that for a little while. And I went back and I reread the OD&D books, AD&D, and it suddenly occurred to me that we've had this sitting in front of us the entire time, but it was subtle. And I think the reason it was subtle is manyfold, and I'll get to that in a second. So what was in front of us? Well, if you go and look at OD&D and AD&D, at the class descriptions, every level has a name, a title. That implies advancement. That implies status. That implies power, because as you move up the ladder, so to speak, you do gain certain types of power. And on top of that, you also have the fact that OD&D and AD&D promote an endgame, where the idea is, as you amass this wealth and power and abilities and hopefully friends and comrades, your ability to control and lead and influence an area around you grows until you can build your own castle, stronghold, tower, temple, hideout, what have you, depending on your class. And from this edifice, you can then project that power not only in the area around you, also known as a hex, but you can start projecting that same influence and control into the neighboring hexes. thereby, again, growing your influence, And that was really kind of eye-opening to me that, okay, so we have here the idea of the end game, but the idea of chaining the two together, that as your XP grows and as your level grows, that you would start to basically become a VIP. And then one other final bit of this kind of plugged in for me. I like the idea, and I chewed on it for a while because, right away that seemed to translate to players who were involved in things like religions, clerics, what have you, or if you were part of a mercenary group. The idea of, hey, you completed a mission, you did XYZ that really helped us out, we're gonna make you, a first lieutenant or a captain. That kind of makes sense. But I wasn't really sure what to do if the players were just, Joe or Jane, fighter every person, or someone that wasn't affiliated with a faction. The final piece of it fell in for me when I was considering the names of the three types of persons that you could be in a chainmail game. So in chainmail, if you're doing the fantasy combat, there's the concept of you being a normal person. Then there's the concept of you being a quote-unquote hero. And then there's the concept of you being a superhero or super wizard. And those equate to power levels in chainmail, how many attacks you can dish out and how many attacks you can take. But if you look at the way chainmail was used, it was also an indication of of your status within the group of forces that you're a part of. If we look at the module T1 Village Hamlet, which I'm very familiar with because I've written a game based off of that. The order of battle, the forces have heroes and superhero level characters in them. And these are the leaders and the lieutenants and captains and whatnot. And I was putting it together, and suddenly it kind of all clicked that there's a way that I can quantify the effect that a player can have and give the players an idea, if you do X, Y, and Z, this can result in you gaining levels. And it's interesting because, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I'm having a discussion with someone on the OD&D Pro Boards forum about this very topic, and they made the case that, well, the way David Arneson and by extension Professor Barker, they would, randomly hand out these levels, and players don't like things that don't have clarity. They like to have a complete path forward. Well, that's a fair point if a DM just randomly says out of the blue, oh, hey, now you're kind of level, you're now level 3. Well, I wasn't expecting that. But if I've already let the players know during this campaign, if XYZ happen, there's the possibility of you gaining a level. Or, maybe even telegraph that a little bit when they're being, put on the mission. So, I now have a way to quantify that. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through how I do it in my games as an example here, because I see where this episode is running long. So level 0 and level 1, you're kind of at the who are you stage, You walk into town, you walk into the tavern, I'm a swashbuckling, swaggering adventurer. Yeah, okay, buddy. Sit down, have a drink, don't hurt yourself with the sword that you're carrying at your side. That kind of level. When you get to level 2 and 3, though, that's when, you start to get known around town. And I'm using town generically to kind of indicate what home base or what area the PCs have set themselves up in. Because at least in my campaign, the PCs usually anchor themselves to a starting place, and they'll work out of that place for a little while. Well, as you're doing things around that place, there's the chance for you to grow your reputation, either in a good way or a bad way, because, hey, you might want to be, the bad girl or the bad boy, upsetting people, making them wonder about you, that kind of thing. But your reputation will grow. So that by the time you hit 4th level, you've also hit hero level, because in Chainmail OD&D, 4th level was equated with the hero level, which was one of the groupings from Chainmail. So a hero is exactly what it sounds like, but they're a hero of that locality. By 4th level, you have probably done enough to be famous or infamous, and hero may be, tongue-in-cheek irony as much as it is an actual real title. But, you've gotten a reputation. You're well known around the town. You can project a bit of power in that town. I'm the hero of Vale Town. Therefore, the mayor does listen to me when I say XYZ. I can walk into the tavern and probably get a free drink. And the bartender's going to tell me the rumors rather than me having to pay for them. And things like that. And, if the players haven't done a single thing in terms of, joining a faction or building themselves up or what have you, that's okay, because the effect of them is still felt. When my players go into town now at 4th level, there's a bit of deference given to them. There's, they have earned that rank, and there's some reward coming of it. The next kind of step is that now they're getting to be known regionally. And so, the area around town, think of it, if you're in town, well, now you're getting known in maybe the counties around town, maybe, to use an American phrase, the state, if you will. If you're 2nd level, and you leave town and you go to somewhere else, and you're like, I'm fighter so-and-so, they're going to be like, okay, and? Well, now, after hitting 4th level, you're going to start to have a reputation that's starting to spread. That then takes us into 5th, 6th, and 7th levels. And we're kind of repeating now at a regional level what happened at the local level. So at a regional level, levels 5, 6, and 7, you're starting to get known. Your reputation is spreading beyond the town, beyond the locale, and is going out into, various other places. Now it's not who are you, it's like, oh yeah, you're so-and-so from Vale Town. Yep, I've heard of you, and the way you ran out the goblins, and the way you cleared out the dragons, and so on and so forth. And again, the players are starting to feel that benefit of reputation. In town, they are starting to work their way towards nobility, towards leadership. And this is going to play into the whole idea of a stronghold in a second. Now, what about outside of the region? What about across the rest of the map? Well, your campaign is your campaign, but in my campaign for levels 5, 6, and 7, they are at a across the entire map level, they'll move from a "who are you" to a "oh yeah, I've kind of heard of you," so that when they finally hit 8th level, superhero level, this is the point in the campaign where, yes, probably everyone has heard of you. Maybe only a little bit, maybe to a decent amount, or maybe to where you're actually living right next to this superhero. And this is the point at 8, 9, and 10 and beyond where the strongholds and the holding of the leadership of the locale of the region really starts to come into form. In OD&D, 8th level was where a priest could start to build a temple. You became a matriarch or a patriarch, and you could build your temple and attract followers and so on. Level 9 is where fighters could construct their castles, where magic users would become sorcerers. They could start to construct their towers, their libraries, and whatnot, and again start to project power from that stronghold. So in my campaign, level 9 is where you begin to be a leader. Be someone that can make things get done with, a command versus a negotiation, what have you. So how does factions and missions and XP work into all this? So if I've got these nice groupings around the levels and their effect and what they do and how they project, what about XP? Well, I still award XP for monsters and treasure. But I also make it clear that levels can be gained for based on their faction or their area of influence. And what do I mean by that? So levels 1 and above, you can definitely affect your locale, the town that you're living in. If I started off in Vale Town, and I did a service for Vale Town. I saved the school children from the marauding goblin horde that kidnapped them. And I wiped out those goblins. Well, that has the possibility of raising my level, depending on the play, depending on what we as the group have done, and my decision and ruling as the dungeon master. If you're level 5, 6, and 7, and you do something for the region around you, a horde of horrible magical invaders have entered and are terrorizing the countryside, for miles and miles around, and I go and I wipe that out. That might see me increase the level because now my influence and my reputation have grown such a big amount because of that action. A little bit easier to figure out for factions, go out and do a mission for my church, and my church is seen in a positive light, and, everybody's singing the praises of my God. Well, as a paladin or a cleric, it's very likely I may have bumped up a level because I'm being rewarded by my deity for those services, and so on. And so I think these things for factions can tie together very nicely. I think that's about all I have on that, Definitely, I try to make it clear in the beginning of, say a set of adventures, or if the players have decided to go off and do something that, their characters could benefit in such and such a way, when the church priest or priestess is giving the mission, if you do this, you will become a curate, blah, 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 that kind of thing, more subtle ways, you rescued the children and they hold a parade in your honor, and the mayor gives you a key to the town, and so on, and, there's level 3, that kind of thing. I guess, I've used this in my campaign, and it's worked very well, and I've been able to reward the players and see them grow, and their characters grow as they've, fit in with this way that I look at XP and leveling. I also think that doing something like this gives my players more incentive than just, monsters and treasure. It allows them to think about what effects am I having on the people that I'm interacting with beyond just a role-playing, but there's a tangible benefit that they can see and helps their characters to grow. Okay, I think I've rambled on enough. A little bit longer of an episode than normal, but I hope this was informative. And, if you have any questions or comments, let me know what you think. Until next time, stay safe and game on.